Usually when we think about a massive security breach, like a bank vault getting robbed or some highly secure data facility being compromised, there's this expectation of just like brute force.
Right. Yeah, like explosives or something.
Exactly. We picture a highly trained crew with thermal lances cutting through 2 feet of reinforced steel, or, some cinematic explosion blowing the vault doors right off their hinges.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
We expect the breach of an impenetrable fortress to be loud.
Yeah. Loud, aggressive, and undeniably obvious.
Well, the human mind naturally associates vulnerability with overwhelming external force. I mean, if something is going to break our defenses, we just assume it has to be larger and louder than the walls we've built, right?
Right. But then you talk to actual cybersecurity experts or physical security consultants, and they tell you that the most devastating breaches almost never happen that way.
No, they don't.
They don't use explosives. They don't use battering rams. They use social engineering.
Which is so much scarier.
It really is. The catastrophic breach is usually just like a guy in a high-vis vest holding a clipboard who confidently walks through the front door because he looks like he belongs there.
Yeah. Or it's a perfectly worded, polite email that subtly tricks a high-level executive into voluntarily typing in their own passwords.
Exactly. The most profound compromises of security, they don't start with a bang. They start with a conversation.
That's such a great way to put it.
Right.
The defenses aren't broken from the outside. They're voluntarily lowered from the inside because of a manipulated perception of reality.
The manipulated perception.
It is the absolute definition of subversion.
Yeah.
And, it is exponentially more dangerous than a frontal assault because the victim often doesn't even realize they have been compromised until the vault is already empty.
And that incredibly subtle, quiet manipulation is exactly what we're looking at today. So welcome to you, the listener, to this special Sunday edition of the Morning Roundup.
We are so glad you're here with us.
If you have been following our current weekend series, you know we are doing a deep dive, going chapter by chapter through the foundational texts of the Bible.
Last week was week 2.
Right, week 2. And we unpacked the utopian setup of Genesis 2. So that was the establishment of order, the baseline of harmony, and the parameters of paradise.
And today is week 3.
Today is week 3, and our mission is to tackle the raw text of Genesis chapter 3.
Which, it is arguably one of the most consequential pieces of literature ever written.
Without a doubt.
It really is. It has shaped the philosophical, legal, and psychological foundations of much of the world, completely regardless of an individual's personal background or belief system.
And just to set the stage for you, the listener, we are looking at the foundational narrative of what is traditionally called the fall of man.
The fall.
We have a single source today, which is the ancient text of Genesis 3. And the goal of this deep dive is to extract the mechanics of temptation, that deeply ingrained psychological instinct to hide when we fail, and the profound, world-altering consequences of breaking the ultimate boundary.
And we should clarify, we are not here to debate religious dogma.
No, not at all. No dogma, no theology, or historical literalism debates today. We are approaching this impartially to explore what this ancient text actually says about human nature, responsibility, and the loss of innocence.
Because whether you view this as literal history or a profound mythos, the psychological archetypes presented here, they map incredibly accurately to the human experience.
They really do. It's uncanny. So let's just jump right in.
Let's do it. So the text introduces a new variable into the garden ecosystem immediately in the first verse.
Right out of the gate.
Right out of the gate. It states, "Now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord God had made."
Crafty. That's a specific word.
Very specific. The Hebrew word used here for crafty is arom. And this is just a brilliant piece of ancient literary wordplay that sets the tone for the entire chapter.
Okay, unpack that wordplay for us.
So the very last verse of the previous chapter, Genesis 2.25, states that the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed.
Right, we talked about that last week.
Yeah, well, the Hebrew word for naked is arumim.
Oh, wow. So arum and rumamim.
Exactly.
So the text is explicitly linking their physical and psychological state of nakedness to the serpent's state of craftiness.
Yes. They are transparent, entirely exposed, and operating without hidden agendas. And the serpent takes that same core attribute, that lack of covering, and twists it into manipulation.
It operates below the radar.
Right. It's subtle.
Because, the text doesn't say the serpent was terrifying. It doesn't say it was a massive fire-breathing dragon charging at them. It says it was shrewd.
Shrewd, yes. And the strategy of the serpent relies entirely on that shrewdness. Notice the tactic it uses when it approaches the woman.
It's the clipboard and the high-vis vest.
Exactly. It doesn't launch a frontal assault on the concept of the creator. It doesn't slither up and demand rebellion or declare that God is an oppressive tyrant.
Because that would trigger her defenses?
Right. That would be the thermal lance on the vault door. It would trigger the woman's defensive instincts immediately. Instead, the serpent initiates a casual dialogue with a question.
A simple question.
Did God actually say, "You shall not eat of any tree in the garden"?
It introduces this microscopic seed of doubt regarding the exact parameters of reality.
A tiny seed.
It's like a sleazy defense attorney looking for a loophole, or, a gaslighting colleague who slightly misrepresents a conversation just to make you question your own memory.
Gaslighting is a perfect modern parallel.
Because look at the sheer exaggeration in the question. Did God say you shouldn't eat of A and Y tree?
Right. Which is absurd.
It's patently ridiculous.
Mhm.
Based on our source text from last week, the rule in chapter 2 was that they could eat freely from every tree in the entire garden, with only one single exception.
And the serpent knows that. The exaggeration is a highly calculated mechanism to reframe the narrative.
How so?
Well, think about it. If you want someone to rebel against an authority figure, the very first step is to frame that authority as unreasonable and oppressive.
Ah, okay.
By suggesting that God forbade all the trees, the serpent paints a picture of a deity who is stingy. A God who places humanity in a garden of infinite abundance, only to cruelly forbid them from enjoying a single bite of it.
Wow. So the question is designed to make the woman feel deprived.
Exactly. It creates a sense of lack where none existed.
She does catch the lie, though.
Hmm.
I mean, in verse 2, she corrects the record.
She does.
She says, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, 'You shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die.'"
And right there is where things get really fascinating.
Because she adds to it. Now, going back to the raw text of Genesis 2, God never said anything about touching the tree.
Nothing at all.
The instruction was strictly about consumption. The touching part is a brand new addition to the rule.
Yes. The woman accurately states the core boundary, but she appends a buffer zone to it.
A buffer zone.
And this provides a really fascinating window into human psychology. When humans feel restricted by a rule, or when we are trying intensely to avoid a specific temptation, our instinct is to exaggerate the rule ourselves.
We build fences around the fence.
We build fences around the fence. Perfect way to say it.
We see this constantly in modern life, like a financial advisor tells a client they need to reduce their discretionary spending to save for retirement.
Right. Just cut back a little.
Yeah. But by the time the client is explaining the budget to their family, the narrative becomes, we can never go to a restaurant again, and if we buy a cup of coffee, we are going to go bankrupt.
Yes. Or with dieting, you want to eat healthier, so suddenly you say, I am never eating sugar or carbs ever again.
Right. We inflate the restriction to create a margin of error.
But while building that buffer might seem like a protective measure, it actually inadvertently makes the original rule far more fragile.
Wait, how does it make it more fragile?
Think about the physical mechanics of what she has just stated. By declaring that merely touching the fruit results in death, she has unknowingly given the serpent a massive point of leverage.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
What happens if she brushes up against the bark of the tree or holds the fruit in her hand and doesn't immediately drop dead?
The credibility of the entire rule shatters.
Exactly.
Because if the buffer zone proves to be false, the core law feels completely toothless.
Right. The serpent sees this opening. The groundwork of doubt has been laid, and the serpent just drops the pretense of asking innocent questions.
The gloves come off.
Yeah. In verse 4, the subversion becomes direct contradiction. The serpent says, "You will not surely die."
So the pitch shifts entirely at this juncture.
Entirely. The serpent moves from questioning the mechanics of the rule to assassinating the character of the rulemaker.
Assassinating the character. That's heavy.
It is, because the serpent delivers the knockout argument in verse 5. He says, "For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil."
So the message is, God is holding out on you.
Yep. That is the ultimate accusation.
The argument is that God isn't protecting humanity with this boundary. God is repressing humanity.
Repressing them, keeping them subservient.
So the forbidden fruit isn't poison. It's a closely guarded patent. It's power.
A patent. I like that.
And the only reason it is off limits is because the authority figure feels insecure and threatened by human potential.
Right. And we need to look at that concept of knowing good and evil. In the ancient Near Eastern context, this is not about gaining like a textbook understanding of moral philosophy.
It's not about becoming smarter.
No. To know in this sense is to possess the authority to define it. The serpent is offering autonomy. The promise is that humanity no longer has to rely on the Creator to dictate what is right and wrong, what is safe and dangerous. They can seize the intellectual throne and become the arbiters of their own reality.
But wait, I have a pushback here.
Sure, go ahead.
Looking at the timeline of the text, they eventually eat the fruit,
Right?
and they don't physically drop dead on the spot.
True, they do not.
They continue to live, breathe, and walk around for a very long time. So, was the serpent actually telling the truth? Did the serpent sell a lie by utilizing a technical half-truth?
That is the genius of the deception. The serpent leverages a strictly biological interpretation of the word die to obscure a much more catastrophic reality.
A biological interpretation.
Right. The text implies that the death warned about in chapter 2 was comprehensive. It was the death of harmony, the death of innocence, the death of their uninterrupted connection with the source of life itself.
The analogy that makes the most sense to me here is pulling the plug on a lamp.
Oh, I love the lamp analogy. Break that down.
Well, when you yank the cord out of the wall, the light bulb might take a fraction of a second to fade, right?
Right.
The filament might still glow briefly.
Hmm.
But the connection to the power source is fundamentally dead
Yeah.
the very millisecond the cord is pulled.
The very millisecond, yes.
The eventual darkness is just the delayed symptom of the disconnection.
And the serpent's brilliance lies in using that delayed biological symptom to dismiss the immediate ontological death.
So the manipulation is complete.
It is. The seeds of doubt have blossomed into outright suspicion. The rule is no longer perceived as a protective mechanism. It is now viewed as an unjust prison.
And once that psychological shift occurs, the physical action of breaking the rule is just a formality. I mean, the vault door is already wide open in her mind.
Yes. The internal defenses are down.
So in verse 6, the text slows down the pacing significantly to give us the exact anatomy of the temptation.
It's a very methodical verse.
It says, "So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its food and ate."
The text portrays a highly calculated multi-sensory evaluation here.
It wasn't just a slip-up.
Not at all. This is not a mindless blunder. The woman evaluates the tree on 3 newly adopted criteria, and those criteria map perfectly to the totality of human desire.
Let's look at those.
Good for food represents the practical, physical appetite, the pragmatism of the object.
Right. And a delight to the eyes speaks to the aesthetic appeal, the emotional draw of beauty.
Exactly. And desire to make one wise hits the intellectual ambition, the promise of elevated status, hidden knowledge, and ultimate autonomy.
So it hits the physical, the emotional, and the intellectual simultaneously.
The trifecta. Once an object appeals to all 3 of those domains, especially when the individual has already accepted the premise that the rule forbidding the object is an unjust repression, the pull becomes absolutely irresistible.
It represents a complete hijacking of the human value system.
It does. But, the narrative contains a critical detail hidden right at the end of the verse.
Oh, this part. This part is huge.
It is perhaps the most damning phrase in the entire account. She takes the fruit, she eats it, and then the text says, and she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate.
Who was with her? That phrase completely shatters the cultural assumption I had growing up.
Most people miss it entirely.
I mean, I always pictured Adam off in another quadrant of the garden, naming a platypus or pruning a distant hedge, completely unaware of the danger, until Eve comes running over with a half-eaten piece of fruit.
That's the Sunday school version.
Right. But the text explicitly says who was with her. He wasn't absent.
No, the Hebrew grammar strongly implies his presence in the immediate scenario. Furthermore, the verbs the serpent uses when addressing the woman in the preceding verses, they are plural.
So the serpent is addressing them both.
For addressing them both. Adam is standing right there, listening to the entire manipulative pitch, watching the boundaries of reality being deconstructed, and he does absolutely nothing.
And Adam received the original rule directly from God in chapter 2 before the woman was even created.
He has the primary data.
He possesses the unmediated data. Yet, while the serpent twists the truth and the woman navigates this intense psychological assault, Adam remains entirely silent.
It highlights a profound failure of passive complicity. Cultural readings often fixate heavily on the active transgression of eating the fruit, but the text places equal weight on the failure of omission.
The silence.
The failure to speak up, the failure to intervene, and the failure to protect the parameters of the garden.
He is captivated by the prospect of unauthorized autonomy just as much as she is.
Exactly. He allows the subversion to happen,
Yeah.
preferring the potential reward of the serpent's promise over the responsibility of defending the truth.
So they both consumed the fruit, and the serpent had guaranteed that their eyes would be open and they would be like God.
Right.
In verse 7, the text delivers the result. The eyes of both were open, so the serpent was technically right. They got the prize. They achieved the enlightenment.
But the enlightenment is immediately sour. Read the conclusion of the sentence.
And they knew that they were naked.
Yeah.
It's the emperor's new clothes in reverse.
What a great way to describe it.
They thought they were wrapping themselves in the glowing robes of deity, acquiring the supreme, overarching knowledge of the universe.
Instead, the very first realization of their newly acquired wisdom is that they are totally exposed, vulnerable, and grossly inadequate.
The irony embedded in the text is staggering.
It really is. The serpent promised the perspective of a creator, but the perspective they received was purely self-conscious terror.
Because prior to this moment, nakedness was their natural state of innocence.
There was no shame because there was no concept of judgment, exploitation, or inherent flaw. But the moment they attempted to seize the authority to define good and evil, the moment they tried to occupy the seat of God, they instantly realized they were utterly unequipped for the job.
They suddenly realized they're just hairless apes standing in a garden they don't own, playing a game they don't understand.
Yeah, the sudden influx of self-awareness, without the divine capacity to process it, results in just a crushing wave of shame.
And the text details the very first human innovation in the wake of this shame. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths.
The fig leaves, they represent the primal human instinct to manage perception when caught in a failure.
Image management.
It is the invention of image management. When the internal reality is exposed as flawed, the immediate psychological response is to manufacture an external covering.
And fig leaves are a fascinating choice of material if you think about their physical properties.
They are. Tell us about that.
Well, yes, they are large, but they are also abrasive. And more importantly, when you disconnect a leaf from a tree, it begins to die immediately.
Immediately.
Within hours, it dries up, curls, becomes brittle, and turns to dust. It is a frantic DIY attempt to hide inadequacy using materials that are inherently temporary.
And this behavior is deeply entrenched in modern psychology.
Oh, everywhere.
We curate social media profiles to present an illusion of total success while our internal lives are chaotic.
Right. Or, an executive bombs a crucial presentation and immediately starts stitching together excuses about the analytics software malfunctioning to cover the fact that they just didn't prepare.
Exactly. We manufacture these flimsy makeshift coverings to hide the fact that we are flawed. But a makeshift loincloth of fig leaves is a horizontal solution to a vertical problem.
A horizontal solution. Right.
It might obscure your physical vulnerability from your peer, but it is entirely superficial.
Because the real test isn't whether you can hide from each other. The real test arrives in verse 8.
Verse 8.
And they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden.
So the physical cover-up of the leaves immediately escalates into a spatial and psychological cover-up.
There is immense tragedy in the imagery of verse 8. Consider what they are using as a barricade among the trees of the garden.
The trees.
The very environment that was designed for their flourishing, the very trees that were given as a gift for their sustenance, are now being weaponized to hide from the giver of the gift.
Wow. Their alienation has completely infected their relationship with reality.
And then God calls out to the man in verse 9 and asks, "Where are you?" Now, from a narrative standpoint, is the text implying that God is suddenly not omniscient?
Like, he lost them?
Yeah, did the creator of the universe lose track of two humans behind a shrub?
Not at all. If we analyze this through the lens of ancient Near Eastern literature or even basic organizational psychology, where are you is an existential question, not a geographical one.
It's a prompt.
It is a prompt for confession. It is an invitation for humanity to step out of the shadows, drop the crumbling fig leaves, and own their current state of ruin.
It makes me think of a CEO walking into a boardroom.
Okay, lay it out.
The quarterly earnings report is already on the table. The numbers are deeply in the red, the company is bleeding capital, and the CEO looks at the regional manager and asks, "Where are we on the Q3 projections?"
Oh, that's good.
The CEO isn't asking for data. The CEO already has the spreadsheet.
Yeah, they have the numbers.
The question is an executive test of character.
Yeah.
Will the manager own the failure, or will they retreat into defensive posturing?
That parallel captures the dynamic perfectly. God is providing Adam with the opportunity to take agency.
But Adam doesn't do that.
No, Adam's response in verse 10 sets a dark precedent for human behavior. He says, I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself.
He confesses to the symptoms, but he completely ignores the disease.
The disease, yes.
He admits to experiencing fear, to noticing his nakedness, and to the act of hiding. But he conveniently leaves out the part where he committed treason by consuming the only forbidden object in existence.
And because he refuses to offer the truth, God presses the issue with direct, inescapable questions in verse 11.
The follow-up.
Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree of which I commanded you not to eat? The corner is turned. There is no more room for evasion.
And this triggers what might be the most deeply infuriating and yet entirely recognizable moment in the entire text.
The blame game.
Verse 12 introduces the blame game. Adam answers, the woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me fruit of the tree, and I ate.
The psychology of blame and narcissism on display here is remarkably sophisticated.
It's masterful evasion.
It is. Adam constructs a multi-layered defense mechanism designed to entirely erase his own agency. First, he points the finger horizontally. The woman.
Right.
He frames himself as a passive victim of her initiative, completely omitting the fact that he was standing right there the entire time.
He acts as if he was just minding his own business and the fruit magically appeared in his hand.
Exactly. But the horizontal blame isn't enough to clear his conscience, so he points the finger vertically. The woman whom you gave to be with me.
Wow. That is the most brazen deflection in the narrative.
It's unbelievable.
He is subtly implying that the structural failure of the garden is actually the creator's fault.
Yes. The subtext is clear. He's saying, I was functioning perfectly when I was alone. Then you introduced this defective variable into my environment, and she ruined everything.
So it's God's fault for making her.
Right. He's saying, if your gifts were better designed, I wouldn't have failed. Therefore, the liability rests with you.
He manages to indict his partner and his creator in a single breath, constructing a reality where he is the only innocent party.
It's a total refusal to own his choices.
And then God turns the investigation to the woman in verse 13. What is this that you have done?
And she replicates the exact same ego defense mechanism. She says, the serpent deceived me, and I ate.
Passing the buck.
She passes the buck further down the chain of command. God questions Adam. Adam blames Eve. Eve blames the snake.
It raises a profound philosophical question about human hardwiring. Is the human ego fundamentally incapable of unprompted accountability?
It's a great question.
I mean, neither of them says I made a terrible choice. Neither says I was arrogant. They both construct narratives where they are merely subjects acted upon by external forces.
The text argues that the immediate byproduct of guilt is the loss of accountability. When humans experience profound shame, the survival instinct of the ego kicks in, and it will go to extraordinary lengths to protect itself from the crushing weight of responsibility.
We see that everywhere.
We do. We will blame our genetics, our upbringing, our socioeconomic status, our spouses, or society at large, rather than look in the mirror and declare, I chose this action.
Because there is a total refusal to take ownership of the mistake, the disruption to the world order cannot be repaired internally.
They can't be.
The consequences of their autonomy have to be formalized. Their broken relationship with reality immediately bleeds into the environment around them.
Yes, and the text details this formalization in a highly structured sequence. God hands down the judgments, which are often referred to as the curses, in the exact reverse order that the blame was passed.
Reverse order, so it starts with the serpent.
It starts with the serpent, moves to the woman, and concludes with the man.
Let's examine these judgments, because this is where the narrative scales up from a localized garden drama into a cosmic explanation for the state of the world.
A cosmic explanation, absolutely.
In verse 14, God addresses the serpent, cursing it to go on its belly and eat dust. But verse 15 introduces a deeply cryptic prophecy.
Very cryptic.
I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel.
Verse 15 is one of the most heavily debated and analyzed sentences in ancient literature.
I can imagine.
It sits at the intersection of wildly different historical interpretations. In the broader historical Jewish tradition, this is often interpreted as a poetic framework for the perpetual, ongoing struggle between humanity and the base, deceptive forces of the world.
Like an internal struggle.
Yes. The serpent represents our lower instincts, striking at our heels, meaning it is a constant grounding, daily struggle. Humanity has the capacity to crush those base instincts, to bruise the head, but it requires endless vigilance.
And the Christian interpretation takes that exact same text and views it through a highly specific messianic lens.
Yes, within Christian theology, this verse is known as the proto-evangelium, or the first gospel.
The first gospel.
Right. In that framework, the offspring of the woman isn't just a collective reference to humanity, but a specific prophecy pointing to a singular descendant who will eventually take a painful strike to the heel in order to deliver a fatal, definitive death blow to the head of evil.
Wow. Two very different ways to read the same text.
They are. But regardless of which lens you view it through, the text guarantees one inescapable reality. Human history moving forward is going to be a war zone.
A war zone. And that war zone immediately spills over into the fundamental human relationships.
It does.
In verse 16, the focus shifts to the woman. I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you.
These verses describe the total fracture of harmony across the core domains of human existence.
Fracture. Yeah.
For the woman, the fracture occurs in the domains of creation and relationship. Childbearing, which in a utopian state would be the ultimate joyous manifestation of the garden's abundance, is now laced with intense physiological pain and existential danger.
The life-giving process itself is traumatized.
Yes. And the relational fracture is equally brutal. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you.
To a modern ear, that sounds like the invention of toxic power dynamics.
Wait, to understand the depth of this fracture, we have to unpack the Hebrew word used for desire here, which is teshuka.
Tejuka.
This does not mean romantic inclination or affectionate longing. If we cross-reference this with the very next chapter, Genesis 4, God is warning Cain about the destructive nature of sin.
Okay, what does he say?
God says, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire, its teshuka, is for you, but you must rule over it. It is the exact same linguistic construction.
Oh, wow. So the desire is the drive to consume, to master, and to control.
Exactly the point. The text is depicting the catastrophic collapse of the partnership we saw established in Genesis 2.
The bone of my bones parody is gone.
Gone. The perfect parity is replaced by a constant grinding tug of war for dominance. The woman's inclination will be to control or master the man, and the man's response will be to dominate or rule over her by force.
It is the architectural blueprint for relational strife.
It is. The partnership is replaced by a hierarchy maintained by manipulation and power.
And the fracture continues as God addresses Adam in verses 17 through 19.
The ground itself.
Right. Because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you.
The environment pushes back.
By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. For you are dust, and to dust you shall return.
So we observe the fracture of marriage, and now the text details the fracture of humanity's relationship with nature. The ground itself is rendered hostile.
Work isn't a joy anymore.
No. Work, which in Chapter 2 was presented as a joyful, cooperative cultivation of a responsive environment, now transforms into agonizing toil.
The soil resists.
It resists, it produces thorns and thistles. Nature is no longer an ally. It is an adversary that must be endlessly wrestled with just to extract mere survival.
I think of this like a catastrophic software bug that gets introduced into a complex computer network.
Okay, expand on that.
Well, the bug doesn't just mess up one isolated file, right? It infects the root operating system.
The core.
The hard drive corrupts, the memory glitches, the display fails. Everything downstream of the infection is compromised.
It breaks the whole system.
Exactly. And the debate I always hear regarding this section is about the nature of the curses. Like, is this text depicting God as a vindictive deity actively throwing lightning bolts of punishment at them?
Right.
Or is God simply explaining the natural physics of a world that has intentionally disconnected itself from its power source?
That is a profound distinction, and it goes to the heart of how different traditions view the nature of divine justice.
How so?
Well, many scholars and philosophical traditions read this text exactly in line with your software analogy. God is established in the text as the source of life, order, and harmony.
Right.
By choosing to consume the fruit, humanity explicitly chose to assert autonomy from that source.
They chose to unplug the lamp.
Precisely the point of the analogy. The curses are not arbitrary, vindictive punishments. They are the unavoidable ontological consequences of severing the cord.
Natural consequence.
If a system disconnects from the source of life, entropy is the only possible result. The marriage degrades, the soil degrades, the physical body degrades.
So death wasn't just a penalty.
Death wasn't an imposed penalty so much as it was the natural, physical result of walking away from the life support system. You are dust, and to dust you shall return is the ultimate reality check.
Wow.
Humanity attempted to seize the status of a creator, and the universe reminds them of their base material composition.
They are now facing a reality defined by physical pain, relational warfare, exhausting labor, and impending death.
It's incredibly bleak.
The utopian garden is entirely compromised. So how does the human psyche survive the immediate crushing shock of this new reality?
Which brings us to verses 20 through 24.
Yes, where we see the fallout, but also fascinating elements of grace.
Verse 20 provides one of the most stunning, counterintuitive moments in the entire narrative.
The naming.
The naming. God has just finished outlining the entropic decay of their world, concluding with their inevitable return to the dust. The crushing reality of mortality is hanging heavy in the air.
You'd think they'd be entirely defeated.
But in response to this death sentence, the text says, "The man called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living."
The optimism in that naming is wild.
It is wild.
He doesn't name her Deathbringer. He doesn't name her the ruiner of paradise. He names her Eve, a name rooted in the Hebrew word for life.
Life.
He calls her the life giver.
It is a staggering act of defiant faith. In the absolute nadir of human existence, staring down a cursed earth and their own impending disintegration, Adam chooses to focus on the promise of life.
He remembers the prophecy.
He latches on to the tiny hint of hope embedded in the prophecy of verse 15 that her offspring would eventually engage the serpent. It is a refusal to let death be the final word.
And the narrative shows God responding to that posture with a profound action in verse 21. And the Lord God made for Adam and for his wife garments of skins and clothed them.
We have to contrast these garments of skins with the fig leaves they fashioned for themselves earlier.
Right.
The fig leaves were the human attempt to cover their own shame. They were flimsy, scratchy, and temporary. The moment a stiff breeze comes through, those leaves fall apart.
But God steps in and provides a durable, lasting covering.
A durable covering.
Yeah.
But the provision of that durable covering carries a massive, visceral cost.
The cost, yeah.
To acquire garments of skin, an animal had to lose its life. This represents the first recorded death in the narrative.
The theological and psychological implications there are heavy.
Very heavy.
The human effort to cover their own shame was inadequate. The Creator provides the necessary covering, but it inherently requires the shedding of innocent blood.
The cost of their rebellion is visibly borne by another part of creation.
So every single time they look at their clothes, they would feel the tactile reminder of the severity of their action.
Exactly. But they would also be wrapped in the protective care of their Creator. The garments are simultaneously a symbol of their guilt and a symbol of grace.
But the narrative doesn't conclude with a warm hug and a new wardrobe.
No, it doesn't.
The structural consequences of their autonomy are still unfolding. Verses 22 through 24 detail the exile.
The banishment.
God notes that humanity has become like one of them, knowing good and evil. The text then says, "Now lest he reach out his hand and take also the tree of life, and eat and live forever."
Lest he eat.
Therefore God banishes them from Eden to work the ground. He drives them out and places cherubim and a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life.
The exile is the final, definitive severing from the garden state. The physical geography now matches their spiritual and psychological reality.
The reasoning provided in the text for the exile is fascinating, though.
Let's talk about that.
God says he is enforcing the banishment. Specifically, LESD, they eat from the tree of life and live forever.
Yes.
That completely reframes the eviction. I mean, is the expulsion from the garden a harsh, punitive measure, or is it a bizarre, severe form of mercy?
A severe form of mercy.
Because imagine the horror of living forever in a broken, cursed, painful state.
Right.
If you have deeply corrupted software and you freeze the system so it can never be rebooted, patched, or reset, you've created a digital hell.
A digital hell, exactly.
Was locking them out of the tree of life the only mechanism to ensure that the corrupted system would eventually shut down, allowing for a future reset?
That perspective aligns with many profound theological and philosophical readings of the exile. To immortalize humanity in a fallen, degraded state would be the ultimate tragedy.
That would be awful.
Imagine eternal relational warfare. Eternal, agonizing toil against hostile soil. Internal shame. By barring access to the tree of life, God limits the duration of the curse.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Death, while a tragic and unnatural consequence of the fall, essentially becomes a boundary line. It prevents the corruption from becoming an eternal, static reality. It ensures that the current broken state of the world is temporary.
That dramatically alters the imagery of the flaming sword.
Does it?
We are culturally conditioned to picture the cherubim and the flaming sword turning every way as this terrifying, vindictive keep-out sign.
Right, like a guard at a prison.
And on one level, it is a permanent, undeniable boundary. The old world is completely gone. The door to unearned innocence is permanently locked.
But simultaneously, that sword is guarding them from making their own destruction permanent.
The narrative leaves humanity out in the wild, working the very dust they were made from, clothed in the heavy consequences of their actions, facing a wildly difficult and hostile world.
But they are prevented from eternalizing their own ruin.
Which brings us to the most critical part of this deep dive.
The application.
Exactly. We have spent this time analyzing ancient Hebrew syntax, the philosophy of autonomy, and the archetypes of human failure. But information without application is just trivia.
Trivia.
We need to transition from the ancient text to the reality of your actual life today.
So we have traced the mechanics of the fall. We've seen how subversion works, how temptation starts with a seemingly innocent question, exaggerates the boundaries, and appeals simultaneously to our pragmatism, our aesthetics, and our ambitions.
We have examined the primal human instinct to manage perception. The fig leaves, the desperate sowing of fig leaves when we realize we are exposed. We've dissected the psychological death of accountability.
The endless, cyclical blame game where no one is willing to own their actions.
And we've faced the harsh realities of what happens when we disconnect from the source of order. The relationships fracture, the work becomes toil, and the world pushes back.
So what do you do with this information?
Here at the Morning Roundup, we want to synthesize this into actionable, challenging steps.
Yeah.
No caveats, no sugarcoating.
Action step 1. Identify your fig leaves.
Let's get real here.
Take a hard, objective look at your life right now. What flimsy DIY methods are you currently using to cover up your inadequacies or your deep-seated shame?
Right.
Are you using an obsession with career success to cover up a totally failing marriage? Are you using intellectual arrogance to hide profound social insecurity?
Or are you constantly spinning narratives and excuses to your friends to hide the fact that you are drowning financially or emotionally?
Stop hiding. Fig leaves dry up, they crack, and they blow away.
The exposure isn't inevitable.
It is. Step out from behind the trees, drop the image management, and own exactly where you are at.
Action step 2. Stop the blame game. And I want to challenge your worldview directly on this. Take radical responsibility for your life.
Radical responsibility.
Stop saying the spouse you gave me. Stop saying the boss I have. Stop blaming the economy, the political system, your childhood, or the algorithm.
But wait, does external manipulation exist?
Absolutely. The serpent was real. Do other people fail you and hand you bad situations? Yes, the woman handed him the fruit.
Right.
But the text shows us definitively that shifting the blame changes absolutely nothing about the consequences you still have to face. When you blame external factors, you surrender your own agency.
You give up your power.
Own your actions. Look at the failures in your life and say, I ate.
The refusal to accept responsibility is the very lock on the door of your own personal exile.
Wow.
Until you are willing to own your failures, you cannot receive the durable coverings that are required to actually move forward in the world.
Powerful, heavy stuff. And as always, we want to hear from you. Please like, subscribe, and share this Sunday special with someone who needs to hear it.
Share it right now.
And I want you to go into the comments right now. Seriously, engage with this material. Where are you encountering these themes of temptation, blame, and hiding in your own life this week?
What fig leaves are you wearing?
And more importantly, how are you responding to them now that you see the mechanics? We read the comments, and we want to see you taking ownership of your reality.
And as we close this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you step back into your week.
The ancient text leaves humanity locked out of paradise. The gate is barred by a flaming sword. They are forced out into the wilderness to extract a living from the dust.
The consequences are real.
Think about that security vault we talked about at the very beginning of the show. The defenses weren't blown up. They were bypassed through a conversation.
Social engineering.
The vault of paradise was emptied because humanity listened to a lie and surrendered their agency. And now we are all standing outside. If we can't go backward into Eden and our own attempts to cover our flaws fall apart like dried leaves, maybe the only way forward is to stop making excuses, look the mess in the eye, and start building something meaningful out of the dust. We'll see you next time on the Morning Roundup.